It is just obvious now as another report from Elliotte Friedman reveals details on the future of the Leafs' brightest young star in Matthew Knies. As Brad Treliving, he has the most obvious decision to make ever right now heading into this offseason. And with this recent report, we have to dive into what the Leafs roster looks like, players that are likely on the way out, and how Matthew Knies' future looks with this built-up roster. And some looks ahead to free agents as well the Leafs could use to fill some voids. A lot of big stuff coming up on this episode of Hat Trick HQ, but before we get into it, quick reminder, almost 90% of you are still not subscribed, and we have the latest on all your favorite teams in the NHL here on this channel. It's free to hit the button down below. We are pushing for 20,000, and we're getting closer and closer day by day. Thank you for watching. Mark, we just got to jump into this. Matthew Knies, look, it's never been more obvious. So before actually we dive into the quotes, I want to just look at the lineup, because the lineup really tells us a lot about how important Matthew Knies is. So before we dive into this, looking here at the lineup, we know there's a lot of uncertainty with John Tavares, as we spoke about in our last video. We know there's a lot of uncertainty about behind Mitch Marner. When we're looking at a guy like Knies, this team just isn't competitive if you don't keep him around. And before I dive into exactly what Friedman said, how do you feel about this lineup right now with and without Matthew Knies, and how key is he to you looking at the Leafs going forward?
I mean, the big thing is looking at this Toronto roster. We know Mitch Marner is probably going to walk to his new team at some point. John Tavares' future is up in the air. So the last left of the core four is Auston Matthews and William Nylander. But I think Toronto needs to start getting a deeper team. And that's where Matthew Knies is the perfect piece, and you need to get him back. He fit perfectly. He's a hard-nosed guy. We've seen him go in the corners. He might not be a superstar player, but someone that can score you 20 goals at the age of 22 on this top line where all the value is in Matthews scoring a goal. I think the biggest thing is we know Auston Matthews can go out and score 69 goals. Nice. We've seen that. We know a playmaker works on this line, but one thing Toronto has always missed on this line, and what they've had since Matthew Knies has joined this team, is the guy that can go into the corners, work hard, do everything that these star players don't want to do. I mean, a lot of players can do it, but we know guys like Sidney Crosby had their Chris Kunitz. Now, I do think Matthew Knies is miles better than Chris Kunitz, but we're looking at a player that fits perfectly with star players in Matthew Knies. He has a defensive game that he can work on. He's a big body. He'll throw hits. He plays through injuries. We've seen in this playoff run, Josh, I don't think there is another player on this Leafs roster, and obviously Auston Matthews, yes, but that has such a high impact, and getting him signed is the top priority this offseason, in my opinion.
This is why we're saying it's obvious now, because look, there was a lot of talk about obviously the Leafs are going to extend him, right? But like, it's never been more clear than this moment, because again, after this kind of loss, seeing what happened to the Leafs, it's like, what choice do you have? And we have to dive into these quotes now. Look, he said they could have traded Matthew Knies for Rantanen this year. They didn't. So they obviously think he's going to be a big part of their future, and we'll see how those contract talks go. Pretty straight up. But he goes next to say, if you think someone is a core piece, you sign them for as long as you can, because the price will never go down. And I think they will do that with Knies. And, you know, this on its own is not necessarily a shocker to hear Elliotte Friedman say, hey, the Leafs are going to sign Matthew Knies. No, I think that's like fairly obvious in the grand scheme of things, but ultimately he's right. Like, the Leafs had a chance to move him in a big deal. They didn't want to do it. You have this guy that, like you said, Mark, you look at this roster, if he is gone, then what choice do you have but to rebuild at that point, or retool, I should say, not rebuild, because you have a lot of contracts on that D core that are for a bunch of years, and a forward core that looks like a piece of Swiss cheese. And look, Knies as well, though, transitioning into his actual contract, he's going to demand a lot, and this is where people are going to start saying, like, I don't know, I wouldn't be shocked to see an offer sheet for Matthew Knies. That's one of these big things I'm thinking about right now. Offer sheets are going to become incredibly prevalent. Mark, when you're looking at him, just to keep him around, do you think you might have to even overpay him? Like, I know he would have to sign an offer sheet with another team. A team can't just say, I claim you. He needs to sign it himself. But, like, I honestly wouldn't be shocked to see a team overspend on him just to pry him away from Toronto. I don't know what your thoughts are on the future of his contract.
I mean, that's a big thing. We're seeing a lot of fan bases speak out. We're seeing a lot of reporters come out and say Matthew Knies is the prime candidate to get an offer sheet. And I think this is where Brad Treliving's almost going to get this done. Tidy work. Get it done before. Don't risk losing this guy, because if a team comes out, and I'm not going to say someone's going to give him 12.5 million, but if a team does that, you're handcuffed to either look at this and say, hey, we're going to get a bunch of draft capital back, but replacing Matthew Knies is not going to be easy. A budding star that's only 22 years old. I think the big thing is, Josh, you need to bring him back 7, 8 years, whatever it takes. Don't sign a bridge deal. Give this kid a long-term deal. Make him a Leaf until he's in his mid-30s or early 30s, I should say. Do whatever it takes and don't risk the possibility of dictating his future with the cap if another team, like just say the San Jose Sharks, want to overpay for a guy like this.
Yeah, like again, Nyes, by all accounts, like there's nothing saying that he's going to go sign an offer sheet with someone else. But sometimes when a team's willing to overpay for you, it's hard to say no. And when you look at the future of the Leafs, it's like, maybe it's uncertain for him. Hey, he's got that top line role. He might not get that in a lot of other places. And he's got one of the best goal scorers in the world, Auston Matthews, one of the best players in the world. William Nylander's great as well. Again, Mitch Marner probably gone. Maybe Nylander goes to the first line. Maybe they pick up someone else. But for him, it's like, I feel like you need to give him a lot. Yeah, maybe not as much as some other team would be willing to offer sheet him for, but like, is it crazy to say that you give him like an 8x8 kind of deal? Because we look at these comparisons, again, this is via Scotia Stat, comparable contracts here. A guy like Matty Beniers, Quentin Byfield at their age 21 contracts, they were about 7 and 8% of the cap respectively. Somewhere between there, between Byfield and Beniers seems about right to me. So if we're talking 7.5 to 8% of the cap, that does come out to about 7.5 million or in a 6-year deal or a 7-year deal. So I guess he's not eligible for an 8-year deal, is he? Regardless, 7-year deal there, you sign him for 7.7. I would give him even more than that. I think if you're talking about Matthew Knies, you might have to give him 7 years at $8 million just to guarantee it. Is that even too much of an overpay? Is that crazy to say?
No, I think 8 years is perfectly fine because the big thing is everyone's going to start looking at cap hits and say, hey, 8 million seems like a lot. We're going to let Mitch Marner walk over 3 million more than what we're giving Knies. But the big thing is cap percentages is what we need to start looking at. The cap is going up year after year. We're going to see it jump into the 100 millions. This is where a contract like this could age perfectly. You get him in, that drops. If that's down to 5% against the cap, his cap hit, that would be outstanding in 2 years when he's starting to get into his full peak of what we can see out of him. But Josh, I think if you want to go 8.5 even, I think you got to do this to get this deal done.
It might be possible. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on this whole situation. But look, it's not just Knies we got to talk about, who's a pending free agent, restricted, of course. There's a lot of other UFAs and RFAs with this team. And just to have a highlight on this before we end off this video, again, you got to replace all these names as well. So the budget that you're getting from probably leaving Mitch Marner and potentially leaving John Tavares to go walk, that's a lot of money you're getting, right? You're getting $22 million there, which is great. But you still have to fill these holes. And again, just a reminder of what the roster looks like right now. Again, some RFAs like Nick Robertson, like Pontus Holmberg, like Matthew Knies. Holmberg seemed to be a bit of a favorite of Craig Berube at times this season. So you still got to replace Pacioretty, Tavares, Marner, and Lorenz. And it's like, these are not all just easy guys to fill. Because the time, like we've said in the last video, of having your core guys and just filling in with like kind of close to minimum level depth guys, like minimum contract, $2-3 million, $4 million, or like a Scott Lawton acquisition, a half retained. This kind of stuff's not going to work as well anymore. You need to go out and get bona fide talent, Mark. Like, is there any level of worry right now heading into next season, knowing you're losing 2 stars? I know you're getting a lot of cap space, but especially with the position of this team moving forward, do you have any worries about the ability to attract free agents? And if there are any worries on that level, look, I know Toronto usually doesn't have that issue, but if there are worries, especially around the culture or whatever it may be that other people seem to think about the Leafs, is there worries on that front of maybe not being able to fill in the roster, or even a guy like Knies who might not want to stick around? I don't know. Maybe I'm just going too crazy off the deep end here, but I don't think it's that impossible.
I mean, the big thing is you're seeing a lot of these guys want to come home to their hometown team. I mean, we've seen JT do it when he left Long Island, his pajama boy pitcher. And a big thing, we just had a star player speak out and say he was a Leafs fan. Brian Marchand, give him a bag. Get him back. If you can't beat him, let him join it. Let's figure this out. The big thing is they can go out. They can move some of these contracts. It might cost a little bit to move on from someone like David Kampf, but his value is still there. Teams are looking for a shutdown role, 4th line center, 3rd line center. You can still move these contracts out, make things work. Yes, teams are going to look at the Leafs and say, we're not going to help you out. But I do think Toronto has the ability to still make this a competitive roster, even though it's going to be hard. You can't replace someone like Mitch Marner, regular season Mitch, I should say. You can't replace the 30-plus goal scorer in Tavares, but I do think bringing in the right players is exactly what Toronto wants to do. instead of going into insanity and repeating the same thing over and over and over again.
And having Matthew Knies being at the forefront of this, maybe given an increased role, might just be the change they need. I mean, look, his intensity showed up in the playoffs. He had some points there. He, like you said, got into the corners, these board battles, and hey, maybe it represents a bit of a culture shift as well. But we got to hear from you guys down below. What are your thoughts? I think it's never been more clear than now what they need to do with Knies and this roster, but we'd love to hear from you as well, because that'll do it for this episode of Hat Trick HQ. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We got news coming every single day. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host Mark Pye. We'll catch you in the next one.